a guy, Judd Sanson, not related to Samson of the Bible, apparently. He was a 29-year-old man from Queens. He was arrested, Mike, after police said officers found him armed with a cache of weapons in New York early Wednesday. So the NYPD chief said he was arrested. There he is. What a wonderful mugshot. During a random traffic stop, 3 officers in an unmarked car saw him driving a Ford Explorer with a blacked-out license plate. So here's the chief with more.
The work that these officers are doing are keeping people safe and saving lives. An obstructed plate turns into an arrest for a person that is heavily armed, gun, knives, weapons, very dangerous for our community.
A lot more details here. The suspect also had an Arabic word for God forgive me that was etched into a baton that he had in his possession. Apparently, law enforcement said he expressed extremist views online. So what do you think, Mike? I mean, did these officers here prevent a lone wolf attack? What's happening here?
Well, yeah, I mean, it certainly appears that way. We'll learn more. Every active investigation, you've got to kind of step back a little bit and
Sure.
allow that to happen before you can make a final determination as to motive. But, I mean, I think it shows a couple of things. One is it's the little things, right? It's the little things that the police do. As the chief alluded to, it was simply a blacked out plate, right? But the police were proactive and they stopped it. It's like the old broken windows policy that has worked so well. But then, of course, you know, we went through this insane phase of defund the police and all police are racist. And look, you can't have public security unless you have a well-funded, well-trained, well-resourced, and well-supported police department, no matter whether you're talking about a town or you're talking about a federal agency. So I think that's one aspect of it. The other aspect is you can't have public security, much less national security, unless you've got control over your borders, right? That's common sense. And if you don't know who's coming across your border, then you are doing very little to minimize and mitigate the potential risks that you're facing from terrorism. So this was a good stop. This was an excellent stop, but it started with the little things, and it started with a well-trained, proactive police force that saw something and then prevented something much bigger potentially.
Mike, to your point, 8 suspected ISIS-related terrorists from Tajikistan were allegedly vetted at the border, and then they were admitted in. Many high-ranking intel officials are saying that they fear an attack on our homeland is imminent, if not coming very, very soon. So that's coming from people who actually may have recently crossed the border. What can you add to that? What are your law enforcement sources telling you?
Look, they are extremely concerned. Right? There's no way to put this any other way. The federal government is failing in its primary mission of protecting its citizens. Right? That's job number one for the White House, is to protect its citizens. And you can't do that without a secure border. That's why every other nation in the world, you know, has borders and border controls. That's just standard practice. But we have had, you know, again, the numbers fluctuate because people really don't know. But we've got a conservative estimate of maybe 2 million, upwards of 2 million known gotaways over the past 3 years, which means that they made the effort to avoid contact with local authorities. They weren't trying to turn themselves in for asylum. They didn't want to be encountered, so they came into the country. We have no idea who they are. Now you look at the 8 to 10 million that have crossed over the border that supposedly we vetted. Right? Well, I'm here to tell you the vetting process, because it's not because the CBP is not trying, but they just don't have the ability because of the sheer numbers crossing that border and the difficulty involved in trying to identify tens of thousands of people from China. Are you kidding? Trying to vet them and say, yeah, we've looked at their backgrounds, they're fine. So it is no surprise that you would have 8 individuals that in this weak vetting process, background checking process, that they would say, yeah, they don't pose any national threat, and then they release them into the country. This is happening on a daily basis. So, of course, law enforcement across the country at the federal, local, state levels, they're all very concerned at this point.
You know, you touched upon this earlier. Thank goodness those police officers noticed that vehicle with the blacked out license plate. But what if we just simply went on the social media for some of these people? Because it's always a story. we find out that the suspect had previous posts on social media. We find out they had anti-American rhetoric on their social media. I'd like to proactively, when they come across the border, we vet them. How about just looking them up on TikTok? How about just looking them up on Facebook and see where they stand on certain issues? Is that an option, or are we crossing the lines there?
No, not crossing the lines. And look, social media is part of a process that, from a counterterrorism perspective, you have in your kit bag, right? But most of these people coming across the border have no social media footprint, right? And also, they just don't have the time. So what you're talking about is an important part of an investigation method, but it's done when you've got a potential target and you're looking at that target, or you're looking at who are their known associates or other individuals. So you're working an investigation, or you're looking for a potential threat based on some other thread that you pulled over here. The folks pouring across the border on a daily basis, just meandering across, right? They're not subject to that. And most of them, even if they were, you can imagine those tens of thousands coming across from China in the San Diego sector, the idea that somehow we're going to have the resources to look in the Chinese language for a social media footprint and find something, it's just not happening. And so when the White House says, well, look, we're vetting these people, and then we're giving them a date and telling them to return and turn themselves in for a court date in a year and a half or 2 or 3 or 4 years, it's nonsense. They are failing at their number one primary job of protecting Americans.